Hi there, Sir Richard Little joining you once again. I'm from your land partner. If you haven't figured that out already, this could be your first video, and it's number 60 out of a series of 100. So we are, for the mathematicians amongst you, we are 60%. Well, we're 59%, but when we finish this one, we'll be 60% of the way through. Thus far, if you've watched all of the videos, which are taking you all the way through development business, effectively from finding a site and all the way through, well, we've got as far as planning, so we're not gone very far yet, and we're 60% of the way through. So today I'm going to be talking to you about planning, and I'm going to be talking to you about appealing planning decisions. Those of you that have been following this sort of mini-series of videos on planning, you will have, if you followed the last one, the preceding one to this video, I got cut off in my prime, as they say, after about 35 minutes into it. I was just rounding up, but actually I'm just going to do that last little bit because it leads quite nicely into today's subject. So once you're in the process, the decision arrives, which is what we were talking about in the previous video. And if it's consent, if it's approval, it's rah rah rah, maybe. But if you have watched that video, you'll know that let's make sure we know what the conditions are before we get too excited. However, what we didn't quite get to yesterday was what happens if it's a refusal. Okay, it's a refusal. Now, as I've said before, it shouldn't really be a surprise. Now, not to say that it won't occasionally be, but if it's a real surprise, then maybe you haven't thought it through properly. Maybe your advisors haven't perhaps been completely transparent with you. Maybe you haven't asked the right questions. Maybe you were going for a refusal, which I've been teasing on a couple of videos. We will talk about when in probably a couple of days' time, when we talk about planning strategy, why we will actually go for a refusal. But let's just assume you haven't gone for the refusal. You have received a refusal. What do you do now? So we've had some refusals, and I'm going to read what you get. Not verbatim, but I'm going to read what it is, what it actually says to you. So it actually says, and this will be enclosed with your decision letter. It also you get it enclosed with the decision letter, even if it's an approval, because you may well want to appeal against some of the conditions. This is possible. We're not going to get into that. This isn't an exhaustive session on appeals or whatever, or any of the sessions we're doing. Some of them, 20, 30, 40 minutes long, but they're not exhausted on the subject. So there are other things that can happen. Your particular circumstances may not be quite the same as I could be describing. But hey, you got an opportunity on some of the channels, YouTube and Facebook particularly, where you can ask questions. But hey, up to you. So this is what it actually says. If you are aggrieved by the decision of your local planning authority to refuse permission for the proposed development or grant it subject to conditions, then you can appeal to the Secretary of State under sections. You don't really need to know that. So if you are aggrieved, generally it's great use of a great word, I suppose. Yeah, you generally are aggrieved, and actually, well, that's okay, because you can now appeal. So just on the actual process things, you need to do that within 6 months of a date, unless for any reasons like maybe a pandemic or something like that has suspended that and have actually extended the time frame. So it's 6 months. It's a pretty straightforward thing. You use it a form. It's an online form. The online form, effectively, you are appealing to the Secretary of State. But what you're actually appealing to is the planning inspectorate, what we lovingly know as PINS. Yeah, and they're based in Bristol, somewhere, Temple Key, somewhere like that. Yeah, Bristol. Right, okay. So appeals take varying amounts of time. We've had recent changes to the system whereby we're now looking at online virtual hearings, inquiries, etc., which actually will push the process along. You can generally get guidelines when you're looking to appeal what the current average is for your type of appeal. So there's different types of appeal that relate to different project sizes, etc., and different ways of hearing the appeal, written representation, a planning hearing, a planning inquiry. So there's less at the moment going on in terms of visits and things like that. So as I say, it's they're able to fit a little bit more in. You just fill the form in, but obviously it's a little bit more than that, because the key to appeals is all the information that you give with that form. You can't really introduce any major new evidence, if you like, to strengthen your case, but what you can do is bring stuff forward that is actually answering the conditions for refusal, the reasons for refusal. Now, you might need to bring in maybe surveys, maybe valuations. You may need to, you almost definitely will need to hire your planning consultant for this process. Just bear with me. Excuse me. And it may well be, as in the case, we might need a planning barrister to actually lead this. So particularly if we're having an inquiry or a hearing, we had one last year, maybe the year before, where it was split over 2 days. So we have a whole team there sitting there in case they are needed to give evidence. So we've got our whole suite of consultants, from our cost consultant to our valuer, the planning consultant, barrister. I can't remember who else. Did we have somebody? We had somebody about drainage. So we had a drainage consultant. I can't remember else, ecology, that sort of stuff. So anyway, loads of them, all on about 250 quid an hour. So it's an expensive business. It's you invest quite a bit of money in this, but it's not just that, but in the written representation, the case you make before you do get any hearing or inquiry, and a lot of these are done by written representation. You'll never see them or anything. It is just swapping information and paperwork. This is about having your day in court, as it were, making the strongest case forward, and it has to be based on planning grounds, the NPPF. You've heard me talk about the NPPF before, the National Planning Policy Framework. At this point we start using that rather than just the local plan. That's when we start looking at, actually, does the local plan really, is it aligned to the NPPF? If we got an angle there, we can sort of say, well, actually, this interpretation doesn't fit with the NPPF. This is where you've got to know your stuff, yeah? And it is largely consultant stuff here, so you really need to know how to manage your consultants, and because otherwise they'll just eat money. They will eat money, tens of thousands of pounds in many cases, and actually you're not necessarily going to have much chance of a result. Typically, if you're taking a planning decision to appeal, and it is where you have an option or a promotion agreement or something like a conditional contract, purchase contract for a piece of land, there's likely to be a condition in there that says that you'll only take it to appeal if it has a 60% or greater chance of approval, because obviously you're incurring costs, etc., etc. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but the point is, don't just go to appeal unless you've got a really good chance to actually succeed. You may well look at the decision, the planning decision, and say, actually, maybe if we change the project, we change the proposal, we change the scheme in some form, because all you've got to do is you've just got to mitigate as much as you can, totally if possible, all of the reasons for refusal. Now, sometimes that isn't possible, but you could have one reason. I gave an example the other day. The reason was it was to do with a provision of affordable housing, if I remember correctly. We disagreed on the amount of money that we should actually be paying across. That was the refusal. So we knew. We did actually go to appeal on that one. We then knew that if we could actually make a strong case or a stronger case, then we've got a very, very good chance of succeeding. So we see some appeals that are taken forward that are just non-starters. They're just, all they really are fee earners for some people, but equally some landowners and some developers really get indignant that it's been turned down, and they start spending money. But this, as I sort of said before, this process can take quite a long time, So written representations, I think sometimes the target's like 13 weeks, but maybe 20, 26 weeks before it's happened. If it's an inquiry, etc., it could be 6 months, 8 months. I think the one I referred to previously, which is the last one we did, I'm going to say that it took 7 or 8 months before we got the hearing, and then we had the hearing, which was over 2 days, as I always said, quite a costly affair. That's why I remember it. And then it was several months still before we got the decision. There was a reason for that, partly, and it was in terms of that there was some tinkering with the with actually the planning side of things, and not from our point of view, but from the legislative point of view, the process point of view, and it was all to do with viability. I'm not going to bore you with that subject. That may or may not be a video. Viability, we probably need 7 or 10 videos to really explain that to people. But coming back to appeals, so you've got the right to appeal. You need to do it within 6 months. It is a form, but it's not just the form. It's everything that goes with it. I mean, on the plus point, as the last time we did, there wasn't a fee. Well, it's free. It's not free. It's going to cost you thousands in terms of, consultants' fees, etc. But the important thing here is you've got to build a case. This is not emotive. It isn't about emotion, leading not an emotion. This is about, we may have to say it's going to cost us 20,000 or 80,000 or whatever to appeal. It could be a lot less than that. We'll say that it could be a couple of £1,000s, maybe even less than that. Some people successfully appeal themselves without any representation. They do that, and because it might be a refusal on an extension to your home or something like that. It's not all about big stuff. These appeals, they can be really relatively minor. But in our case, it could probably cost 20. It's in the tens of thousands generally anyway to take it to appeal. So we're looking at, is it worth investing any further monies in this project on that scheme? As I said, let's look back, let's revisit it. So we don't rush into it. We've got 6 months. So step back. The bit of the disappointment, if you like, that you're getting from the refusal, as I say, you really should know about it before it gets there, but lots don't. And then it's just sit back and review. Don't sort of just get on download the form, fill it in, or fill it online now. I guess we do. Don't let emotion rule, because you need to sit back and say, is appeal the right thing to do? Is a new application the right thing to do? Again, I've said previously, if it's the first application on that particular site, then you to an extent you get a free go for the next application. Again, not consultants' fees, etc., but the planning fee, the plan application fee. So you might use that. You might utilise that benefit, if you like, and it may well be that you might do both. But again, that's planning strategy. But the important thing is just assess it with your most important advisor, and your most important advisor in this case is pretty much always whoever's doing your planning consultant, maybe one or two others that are experienced in planning, and make that decision and make it a business decision, if you like. So actually, you sit back, you write down what are our options. We can appeal, we can put in a different application, or actually we can forget it. Sometimes it's the time to say no. That's hard, certainly if you've invested a lot of money and a lot of time in the planning process, but actually sometimes it can be the right decision, because things change. And if you're at a protracted planning process, which in some cases can be years, then your circumstances might have changed. The site circumstances might have changed. So many things can be different. So step back. But if you're going to go for an appeal, don't be half-hearted. This is the time when you need to invest, your time, your money, in the right people around you to build the best possible case. Yeah, because it's your day in court, as we say. It's your one chance. Yeah, there is a step after this, but that doesn't happen very often, and that's going to be in the next video. So really, there's not a massive amount to say on appeals. They're very, very much project specific. You know, I know we often say this, but they really are. There aren't any sort of commonalities, and you know, there's lots of commonalities in the reasons for refusal. But actually, what you've got to do, look at those reasons, assess those reasons, take advice. Are we going to go forward? If we've got a, you know, for us, if we've got even a 40% chance of success, we probably still go for it. It really depends on the investment required. But it is going to take time, so this is something you have to bear in mind when you're looking at deal structures, particularly on sites that you haven't actually secured, or you've secured subject to planning, either on an option or you know, or a conditional purchase or anything like that. Or if you're working purely on the planning from a promotion angle, have you got enough time allowed in your agreements, in your contracts, that will allow you to do this? Because if you haven't, you might start the process and then end up actually, you know, the agreement gets torn up because you didn't reach those particular milestones at the right point. So it's not an easy thing. All I would say to anybody that's in this situation right now, and they don't really know what to do, and maybe they feel that the advice that they've got so far might have been partially the issue why they are there, and that happens sometimes. I'll be perfectly frank with you. It's more often that the person putting the application in our case probably developers, have been a little bit delusional about their expectations. It's not as often as that it's the consultants that is giving them perhaps, you know, duff advice in their view. So what I would say to anybody in that position is, reach out to somebody else that understands, another planning consultant. Get that second opinion. A little bit like if you went to the doctors and they sort of said, you know, you're going to lose your leg. You know, you're not just going to accept somebody's opinion. You go on a little bit more. So, you know, it is comparable in a sense from the point of view you need a second opinion, yeah, and maybe even a third opinion depending on what's at stake. We do. We have our own in-house experience, expertise, if you want to call it that way. But equally, we go out, we reach out, and we have go-to planning consultant that deals with most of the appeals that we do. But we also have other planning consultants that we'll take an opinion on, and we'll pay for that opinion. You know, we don't expect it for free. So much is generally relying on what you do once you go into an appeal. You know, not just the investment, but the previous investment that you've made and the future of the project. So, hey, you know, it's not, don't go into it lightly, and I'm sure many of you won't. Equally, don't just stop. So some people get to the point, if it's been turned down, okay, it's not worth going to the appeal. What we'll do is we'll put in another scheme that's for 6 units instead of the 16 that we were going for, because we'll get planning on that. We ain't going to make any money, but hey, we get planning. So there are also times you should not give up. So reach out to somebody. You know, we're always happy to give an opinion. It will only be a sort of very high level opinion on it, you know, because this stuff takes a lot of time. On whether we feel it's worth chasing it or not, you know, and you know, so we're always happy to have a quick call or, you know, something like that in order to give you a sounding board. Are you doing the right thing? Because it's a lonely place, development, and as they say, it's a funny expression, but lonely at the top. I said to somebody earlier today, we both agreed we're both at the top, if you like, of certain organisations, but we nearly always feel like we're working for everybody else, you know, and we're not complaining about that, because it's the team that bring the results home, not us, you know. But in this case, from a planning point of view, sometimes really, really worth getting that, you know, say sounding board, a bit of feedback, a bit of guidance, a bit of support, you know, get somebody point you in the right direction as to maybe the right people to talk to, and also the wrong people to talk to, not so much individuals, but the type of person potentially. So appeals are also, or refused applications are also a really good opportunity. So there's a lot of opportunities amongst those. So even stuff that goes to appeal, we look at this stuff again quite closely. And it's refused on appeal. We're looking at the reasons for refusal all the time. Can we mitigate those reasons? Can we get over those reasons? You know, so we always look at this stuff. And the other thing that is useful for you to do, if you've got a refused application, before you rush off an appeal, look for other refused applications that have happened in that particular planning authority. They're all available on the planning portal. You can just simply search for appeals dismissed, which is a refusal, yeah. And you can get valuable information. What case did they make? What did they put forward? It doesn't have to be the same sort of scheme and the same scale, but it is useful to do that. You are likely going to get a different inspector because they are relatively randomly chosen. So, you know, it's a bit hit and miss, and a planning inspector is just one person, and you're not going to make friends with them, so don't try, you know. Be professional. We're trying to get this to weave in all the way through. Be professional. Yeah, respect their time, respect their abilities, you know, and as I say, at all times, be courteous, be polite, be professional in all your communication with them. If you do get the chance where there's maybe a site visit or an inquiry hearing where you are addressed, you do it in a respectful manner, you know, and you will improve your chances. You won't decrease your chances of success. So not much else I can say in general about appeals. As I say, this is not an exhaustive video on the subject. However, hopefully I've covered a few things and it's been useful for you. And hopefully on that basis you'll continue to watch the rest of the video series once we get out of planning and into the build and different things like that. Hopefully those of you that are already developing, thinking of developing, investing in developing, or even funding developing, somewhere, it's only our opinion. It's an opinion that's based on decades, but it's only our opinion. So funnily enough, we're not always correct, but we don't get it wrong very often. We've got it wrong a lot in the past, and that's why we can now say we don't get it wrong very often now. Anyway, look, this is Richard Little from Your Land Partner, and I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope you keep following the series, and I will be with you again very soon. Take care.